Yo, I bought the LG B7. Let's talk about it. Part 1. This is the LG B7A 65-inch OLED TV. I've had it for a few weeks now. Let's talk about it. Alright, let's talk about the B7A. This is the LG B7A 65-inch OLED TV that came out not too long ago. Initially, I was hesitant to pick this up for one reason, and one reason only. It has a silver bezel around it, and if you walk into a Best Buy or really any TV store, the fluorescent lighting in the store really magnifies this silver bezel. Well, once I got it home, you can't really see it. The lights in this room are really bright. The silver border doesn't really reflect room lighting the same way it does reflect the fluorescent lighting in the stores. So it's not an issue. In fact, when you're not watching any content, the silver border actually looks nice and I like it. And that's a pleasant surprise considering this TV is a little bit cheaper than my other OLED, which is the LG C7 65-inch. So initially I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get another C7 because it has a black frame around it. Well, the good news is, don't worry about it. Just save the money, get the B7A. You won't even notice the silver bezel. The other pleasant surprise is in the United States, our version of the B7 gets a black stand, which is really nice. In fact, I like it a lot better than the stand on my C7, which is silver, and it kind of arches like that. Now, whether or not, the C7 is more level than the B7 due to the characteristics and the shape of that stand, I haven't really measured that. And if this is not level, I haven't noticed it. Really, I don't see this stand, so it's funny because the C7 has a bright silver stand that reflects a lot of light, and that's kind of distracting. And this has a silver bezel, which I thought was going to be distracting. So it's like they're swapping design mistakes, in my opinion. I think one should be all black and one should have silver treatment, but I digress. So that's another difference. The stand on this is better, in my opinion. In fact, it looks like my LG B6 stand from last year. So if you have a B6, this looks pretty much identical. It actually might be the same stand. The back of the TVs look the same. They both have a white backing, and I'm not going to pull this out and show it to you. I'll put a screenshot up or something. The other thing is the image quality is identical. The B7A and the C7, I can't tell any difference, and they're both really, really bright TVs. As you can see, this is 100% screen that's fairly bright. There's not a lot of dark areas in this video that's playing right here, and I have to turn the brightness down when this type of content comes up. And that was kind of a nice little surprise because my B6, for whatever reason, just could not get this bright. And so if you look at the B6 and the B7A side by side, or the B6 and the C7 side by side, the B6 looks darker or more dim, but the colors may look a little more rich. Whereas this is quite a bit brighter than my B6 was, and the images just look different. I don't know what to tell you. With the same settings, the B7A and the C7P, the images or the image quality looks different than the older B6 and C6 from last year. So which one do I prefer? I definitely prefer the 7 series. It's not even close. I struggle with the B6. I could not get it to work for my needs, my liking. So yeah. I love this TV. It is probably my favorite TV right now. Top 3, depending on the time of day. I like LED TVs during the daytime, so I like the 930E, Z9D, Q9 for daytime viewing. But I gotta say, this thing holds its own. In other words, I've had this in the living room with all the windows, and it's very good. It handles bright room and sunlight really well. I was really surprised by that. The other thing is that you have to be mindful of is this screen has a really glossy finish on it. I haven't had an issue with the reflections. I thought I would initially, but after owning the C7 for several months, I love it. It is a phenomenal TV. It's an amazing TV. I would not give it up for anything. I don't care what comes out next year. The C7 is a gem, and so is the B7A. They're the same thing, and you can get this cheaper, and that makes it just even that much better, or that much of a better deal. Now, let's talk about motion performance. Some people are sensitive to motion regardless of what TV you put in front of them. Let me give you some examples. I've owned the X900E, the 930E, I've had the Z90, I do have the C7, I have a couple of TCL TVs. I've had a lot of TVs this year. I'm a little bit crazy. So I'll be the first to tell you that the motion looks wildly different depending on who's watching and also what content you're watching. So some people are sensitive to 24p content, and what that means is it's basically the frame rate. It's basically 24 pictures that are shown in 1 second. So if I took 24 images and slid them across the screen in 1 second, that's what 24p is. It's 24 frames a second. So when that becomes an issue is if you have a 60 hertz panel, because 24 is not divisible by 60. But this is a 120 hertz panel, and it is. So this TV being 120 hertz has no problem with 24p content. And sometimes it's a firmware issue. Don't get me wrong. My Sony 930E earlier this year had 24p judder. It was ever so slight, but some people could see it. I could see it because I was, staring at it and running test videos. But some people couldn't see it and others could. And so when it comes to motion, you've just got to get your eyes on it yourself. And so concerning motion, there's a couple of types of content you have to look out for. There's sports on cable TV, and that's running at 60 frames a second. Well, 60 is divisible by 120, right? So 60 frames or 60p content or 60 frames per second content is going to look great on this. 24 is also divisible by 120, so you're going to be fine there. So if you watch a DVD or Blu-ray in a Blu-ray player, you're golden. It will be just fine. You will not see stutter. In other words, what happens is one of the frames, I think, gets dropped or dismissed. Don't quote me on what's actually happening, but one of the frames is not divisible. In other words, you end up with an extra frame or one less frame. I forget how the TVs handle it. I gotta look back to my notes. But anyway, one of the frames gets screwed up and then you end up seeing judder. I think on the 25th frame or the 23rd frame, who knows? Don't quote me on that. Anyway, you don't have to worry about motion on the B7A. It is fantastic. Where you might notice an issue is the response rate is so fast, it may not have the type of motion blur that you're used to on traditional CRT or LCD TVs. In other words, you need some level of blur. And I know some people have complained about, oh, well, the 940E has too much blur, or the OLEDs don't have enough. In other words, it's perfect motion, but the human eye sees blur when something runs by you really fast. So if something moves back and forth in front of your face, you are seeing blur. In other words, you're seeing like 4 or 5 versions of your hand. So if you do this in front of your face, you're seeing multiple versions of your hand trailing. And so there's a trail going back and forth on your hand. That's what you see in real life, and that's what you want to see on a TV, but it's got to be just right. And getting it just right is really subjective. And so when it concerns motion on different TVs, I usually don't say a TV has perfect motion and you're not going to have issues, because you might and I might not. So don't get hung up on that. My advice is just go look at the TV for yourself. And if you can't, then buy it from a place with a good return policy. If it bothers you that much, and motion is a big dadgum deal, because, I mean, if you think about it, a video is just a sequence of images that are moving. The motion is everything. So if the motion's not right, it just looks like a flip book. And so motion's very important. I've seen people return TVs with perfect contrast, perfect brightness, perfect everything, because the motion was ever slightly off. And that's okay. And they have every right to do that, because these TVs are expensive. You should do what's right for you. Let's talk about who this is for and who it's not for. If you play video games and you play a game with a fixed logo or heads-up display that does not move, it is anchored in that one place throughout your entire gaming session, and that's the only game you play, please don't get an OLED, because you may end up with burn-in. It's just not worth the risk. If you do play games that do not have HUDs or heads-up displays, you're fine. Just keep an eye out for logos or static images that are in the same place. And it's not a big deal. I mean, owning an OLED is like owning a PC, right? Owning a PC was, you had to do, you had to defragment your disk, you had to check for viruses, there was maintenance, you had to take care of it. And an OLED is not like your old TV where you can just turn it on and walk away and leave it unattended. It's a little bit more delicate than an LED. And so there are just some guidelines you have to kind of adhere to if you want to ultimately have the best picture quality on the market. And this is the best image quality that I've found for most viewing conditions and most types of content. I do love some other TVs. I love the Q9, the 930, and the Z9D, and I love the 940E, God bless its motion. I love those TVs because they are standout TVs. They're exceptional at least one thing. And I love that. I love TVs that are amazing at least one thing. I'm not a big fan of TVs that are just kind of average across every category. I love my, think like a home run hitter in baseball, or like you're in basketball, even football, right? Those players that stand out above the rest, you have the guy that can score touchdowns. That's his thing. That's what he's good at, right? He might not be a defensive player, but he's a touchdown guy. So I love TVs that do at least one thing really, really freaking well. Well, for this, it's contrast, right? Best in class. The best for contrast. The black levels don't get any better. I love that. My 930, my other TVs, they do at least one thing best in class, or damn near it. So that's kind of how I function. So as far as the B7A is concerned, movies are amazing. The viewing angles are amazing. The audio is actually really good for built-in speakers. I was surprised by that. It could be the room. If you have a huge room, again, I have this in my office, or one of my offices. This is a smaller space, so the sound could be bouncing off the walls and it just sounds better to my ear. So again, sound is also subjective, but I do have some really good recommendations for a sick sound system. So if you're interested in sound, just let me know. I've had the best of the best of the best when it comes to audio as well. Who do I think this TV is for? I think this TV is for someone who is willing to be careful with it. It's a premium TV. You have to take care of it. It's not a set it up and forget it TV. In fact, the settings alone take a little bit of work to get dialed in just right. And even myself, I calibrate my own TVs. I also work with professional calibrators and colorists, etc. And so, we work together to get these TVs dialed in, and the OLEDs are a little more tricky to calibrate than LEDs. So if you don't have the appetite for diving into the settings and literally just tweaking and playing until you get it right. Now, I will share with you my settings, but still you're going to have to play with it to get it right for you. This ain't a Sony TV. This is not a Samsung TV. The OLEDs are just a little different. I don't know what else to tell you. If you do end up buying one, I'll walk you through kind of my guidelines and what I do. This is my third OLED, so I'm getting a little more experience with them, and I'm getting used to the workflow. So same thing with MacBook computers, right? When I switched to an Apple computer, it was painful switching from a PC, but I've had 5 or 6 of them now, so now I know what to do, and it's like riding a bike. How does this TV compare to the 930E? That's a really common question I get, because a lot of you know that I have that TV and I love it. I think this TV is more well-rounded. The viewing angles are insane. It's like a freaking window against the wall. The contrast is obviously better on this. This gets really, really bright in average scene content. And what is average scene content? Well, you're looking at it. This is probably not the best example, but these highlights right here, they get really bright. And in fact, I can read the text on that little sign right there. This is another example of average scene brightness, right? See these airplanes here? If you measure the brightness for the larger highlight areas on the TV and average that out, that's my benchmark. That's what I look for in a TV. I don't do white square test patterns because that's not realistic. How the hell do you add all this up and say that's 25% or 10%? It's hard. So I watch the content that I know typically will trigger ABL on a TV. And if ABL doesn't kick in with some of those brighter scenes, I'm good to go. ABL never kicks in on this TV for me, except when a commercial comes on, when I'm watching the game or something and the screen goes full white. I'll actually show you what a full white screen looks like. So if I hit menu and scroll down, I think if I go to settings here on the Apple TV, that's full white. So I actually think this screen is silver. It's not white, so bad example, but this is a full white screen, right? And so what I would look for is how dim would that get if this was really white? But this is actually silver, so I'm sorry about that. There we go. So anyway, back to it. The B7A, I love it. If this was out when I was shopping for my C7 earlier this year, I would have went with this. Why? Because the picture quality is the same. I don't notice the silver trim on the bezel. I think it's fun. It's artwork. It is beautiful to look at, and I'll show you. When I turn the screen off, it's like having an iMac computer. It kind of looks like you want to get notified when there's a price drop, firmware update, or anything related to TVs? Subscribe, hit the bell icon so you actually get the notifications, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm Joey. Thanks for watching. Alright, that's it. I'm out of here. I'll see you in the comments. Leave a comment below. Let's talk about it. Oh, and if you didn't know, we're just a bunch of gearheads around here. If you want to join the family, hit that subscribe button. Jump into the comments, because it's a lively conversation around here. Let me tell ya.